Hey YNR fans! Waving hand, welcome to YNR Trends, your go-to spot for the juiciest Young and the Restless updates, shocking spoilers, and all the drama you can't stop talking about. From surprise returns to scandalous twists, we break it all down for you, every day. So grab your coffee, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive right into Genoa City's hottest gossip. According to Thursday, August 14th, spoilers for The Young and the Restless, Lauren Fenmore Baldwin will be taking on a new role, and Kane Ashby's adversary will be rising. Here's what YNR fans should anticipate when Nick Newman takes on a challenge as well. To begin with, Daniel Romalotti Jr. will consider his actual feelings for Tessa Porter and come to terms with the possibility that, at least for him, their friendship is developing into something more. Naturally, Daniel won't be aware of Tessa's current situation, particularly given how uncertain her marriage is right now. Daniel might question whether he still has a shot with Tessa, though, since she is beginning to believe that her relationship with Mariah Copeland may be finished. On Thursday's YNR show, Danny Romalotti will be Daniel's confidant, thus it is likely that he will give some guidance. Given the number of delicate elements involved, Daniel might wish to emphasize the importance of exercising caution. On a more positive side, Danny can gladly tell his father that he's all in since he will need a best man for his impending wedding. In the same way, Christine Blair will also require an advocate. Will Christine ask Lauren to be her matron of honor since she has a big request for her on Thursday's show? Given that Nina Webster is currently grieving over the loss of Chance Chancellor and isn't feeling too joyous, Christine might think Lauren will be willing to take over. Lauren may have a lot of work ahead of her as she assists Christine with the last-minute wedding planning. Nick might accept the challenge if Victor Newman puts pressure on him, just like Lauren does. In the hopes that they can eliminate this menace completely, Victor will press Nick for assistance in taking down Kane. Victor might not need to put in much effort to convince Nick of this as he is now rather upset with Kane. Nick and Victor might both agree that they must play extra dirty if necessary in order to sink Kane. According to previews on The Young and the Restless, Nick might turn out to be more dangerous than Kane thought. Kane Ashby was pacing the length of his living room as if he had spotted a storm approaching, even though the sun had just begun to rise above Genoa City. His mind was replaying the things he had heard the previous evening as his coffee sat untouched on the table, steam curling into the cool air. He was being pushed back by someone strong. This wasn't your typical gossip or small-scale business competition. It was a personal matter. It had been unnerving to hear his name pronounced by the voice on the other end of that whispered phone conversation. Yes, most individuals in this town had enemies, including Kane, but this was different. This one was cautious, patient, and risky enough to wait for the right opportunity. He sensed it even though he didn't yet know who it was. The game was already underway. Lauren Fenmore was at an office that wasn't yet hers, sitting at a slick glass conference table across town at the same moment. With a job offer that may alter her entire perception of her career, the woman across from her was making the pitch of a lifetime. This time, it wasn't about Fenmore's, the world was completely different. Prestige, a fresh challenge, and a reach far beyond what she had established in Genoa City were all promised by the job. However, there were dangers involved. Taking on this responsibility required changing alliances, and in this city, changing alliances had the potential to destroy relationships that had been cultivated over decades. Despite her calm demeanor and courteous smile, Lauren felt the weight of the decision bearing down on her like a physical force. It was an alluring proposition. It's almost too alluring. Nick Newman, meantime, was dealing with a situation that was trying every last bit of his patience. This time, loyalty was more important than money or even the family name. The day before, in a meeting, someone had challenged his judgment. It had been a subtle but scathing remark, the kind that challenged him to prove himself. In private, it had stoked a fire beneath him, but he had dismissed it at the time, refusing to fall for the ruse in front of the others. Although Nick had encountered difficulties in the past, this one was unique as it came from a person he had previously regarded as an ally. It was up to him now to determine if the attack had been deliberate or merely impulsive. He was not going to overlook it in any case. Kane was startled out of his reverie when his phone buzzed on the table. The number was blocked. After he paused, he responded. The voice on the other end was deep, serene, and completely strange. The caller continued, "You don't know me, but you will. And you will regret not avoiding me when you do." Before Kane could reply, the line died. The words reverberated in his head as he stood motionless. This person wasn't playing a bluff. His hand trembled a little as he picked up the cup of coffee and poured himself another. Kane's instincts were warning him that his life was going to be completely upended, and he had learned to trust them. Though her mind was racing with contradicting ideas, Lauren left the meeting with the contract packet securely packed in her backpack. She wouldn't have to leave her house because the job was situated in Genoa City, but the corporation was notoriously hardball. She would be entering a position that would make her a target for competitors in the corporate boardroom as well as the fashion sector if she accepted the position. Michael's voice was already advising her to proceed with caution in her mind. However, a restless, ambitious part of her was already inclined to say yes. Her heart raced at the prospect. Nick began making subtle maneuvers behind the scenes since he was determined not to give his opponent the upper hand. He summoned some reliable people, posed incisive questions, and started to piece together what had actually transpired during that encounter. The more he studied, the more he realized that this was no accident. For weeks, perhaps months, someone had been setting up shop to discredit him. His position in the family business was at stake, not simply his pride. And being forced to leave what he had fought to defend was the one thing Nick Newman would never tolerate. Kane was tense by the time nightfall arrived. He had gone through old files, reviewed previous transactions, and mentally combed through all the people he had ever harmed, whether on purpose or not. Although the list was lengthy, a few names caught our attention. He felt his stomach turn at one in particular. This individual had vanished from the public view years prior following a very publicized argument with Kane on a botched sale. Lawsuits, allegations, and a mutual decision to keep a very far distance from one another were the results of it. Kane was about to be pulled into a conflict he believed he had already survived, though, if they were back in making the calls. Still unsure, Lauren went to Crimson Lights for coffee and some time to reflect. Nick was seated at a corner table with his laptop open and a stiff frown on his face. Despite their courteous pleasantries, Lauren could feel the tension leaving him. She considered asking what was wrong, but changed her mind. There were many people in Genoa City engaged in silent conflicts, and sometimes it was best to keep things secret, for the time being, anyway. She couldn't get rid of the thought, though, that whatever Nick was going through and what was in store for Kane might not be completely distinct storms as she was leaving. After shutting down his laptop, Kane stepped by the window and gazed at the city. Although the streets below were still, he was aware that his adversary was moving pieces on a chessboard that was hidden from view. With the job offer still weighing heavily on her shoulders, Lauren entered her apartment. Nick reclined in his chair, his thoughts whirling with plans for the coming days. 3 different fights, 3 lives, and 1 city where nothing remained apart for very long. Kane's comeback has been difficult to sell, especially to devoted young and restless viewers who don't care about the history. But also for individuals who have identified numerous storyline flaws during the process. As we list the top 10, don't forget to cast your vote at the end and let us know if we missed any. It's a leap to think that Kane Ashby, a grifter and bartender from Australia who worked at several different jobs, became as successful as Victor Newman in just 6 years. As soap opera lovers, we're accustomed to suspending disbelief to a certain degree, but this goes beyond that. Naturally, having assistance contributed to Ashby's quick ascent, which leads us to our next area of disagreement. Kane's father, Colin Atkinson, allegedly taught him how to use legal means to create an empire that could compete with Victor Newman's in just 6 years. The issue? From what we know, Colin was never really good at anything. He spent most of his time being caught while trying to con people. He was a failed mob boss who was once hunted down by a group of irate cow ranchers. It is nearly hard to imply that Colin had this untapped source of knowledge and never cared to use it to further his own wealth. Kane thought someone was attempting to kill Chance, which was the whole idea for Chance being taken to the chateau and eventually dying. Who was trying to harm him if all he did was legitimate and lawful and nobody in Genoa City was aware of his activities yet? Leaving this crucial element unanswered and ignoring it creates a huge gap in the story and Chance's demise. Given how Lily was tricked out of the CEO position at Victor and persuaded she belonged at Winters, we can understand Kane's desire to reclaim Chancellor from Victor and give it to her. However, why does he need to own Jabot, Newman Enterprises, and all of Genoa City's real estate? His genuine intentions are unknown to us, and as time passes, our interest in this most recent business venture wanes. Kane woke up early the following morning, the anonymous threat still playing in his head. He had been unable to sleep because he was tense from every floorboard creak and every distant automobile on the street below. Instead of touching the coffee he had brewed, he stared at a piece of paper on which he had scrawled names, dates, and incidents that might have led him to his adversary. The charges on the list, which appeared to be a criminal's rap sheet, were all related to treachery and included friendships that had ended in lawsuits, shattered relationships, and double-crossed transactions. This seemed unusual to Kane, who had never thought of himself as an angel. This adversary wanted to destroy him, not just exact revenge. Individually. Michael and Lauren were sitting in their kitchen, the contract from yesterday lying open between them. His brow furrowed harder with each page as he read every phrase. Finally, he said, "It's a big opportunity, but this isn't just a promotion, it's a political move. The person making the job offer is considering more than simply your qualifications. They're considering who they can get in touch with via you." Lauren was aware of his correctness. She had supporters, and supporters had rivals. She may become a bridge or a weapon by accepting this position. The idea excited her nearly as much as it alarmed her. Nick was standing in his Newman Enterprises office, looking at the framed pictures of his family, charitable events, and business achievements that were on his bookshelves. Each one stood for something he had battled to defend, but he could now sense those victories being subtly weakened. A message from a reliable source buzzed through his phone. "At the upcoming board meeting, they're trying to harm you. Prepare yourself." Slowly, Nick put the phone down. They had underestimated him, whomever they were. He intended to expose them, not merely protect himself. When a brown letter showed up at Kane's door, his day took a different turn. There were pictures inside, black and white. Blurry security pictures showed him meeting a stranger in an alley, a man whose face was obscured by a shadow. Kane had never been in that alley with anyone, and that was the issue. The image's timestamps, which were dated the previous week, made it obvious that someone was fabricating the evidence. With the air gushing out of his lungs, Kane sat down hard. It was a setup. And they had a goal in mind if they were beginning with fictitious proof. During her afternoon at Fenmore's, Lauren's thoughts were split between the new offer and the day-to-day operations of the store. She found herself examining her own face as she looked in the dressing room mirror. Was she looking at a woman who was ready to go on to the next phase of her life or one who was going to make the worst decision of her life? She had constructed Fenmore's herself, including her family's heritage into each seam. Would she be able to leave? Or worse, would she accept the position and end up becoming a pawn in someone else's conflict? Nick continued to investigate and discovered a little but significant detail. The individual who was opposing him at the board had just met with a rival, someone who had a reputation for causing trouble in Genoa City. Although it wasn't proof, it was plenty to validate his intuition. He started formulating a strategy to entirely reverse the situation rather than only defending his stance. He was going to give them a battle if they wanted one. Kane made the decision to act independently as night fell. After nightfall, he locked his front door, put on a black jacket, and went to a section of town that most people avoided. He would give someone a reason to reconsider if they wanted him shaken. He had no intention of waiting to be cornered. However, as he arrived at the location where the anonymous call had come from, he noticed a car parked close by, a vehicle that belonged to a person he believed had moved out of Genoa City years prior. When Lauren got home late, she discovered one white package hidden behind her door. There was only a picture of Kane inside, no letter or contract. It appeared to be recent. The man from the alley images Kane had received was also in the background, just barely visible. Uneasy, she gazed at it. How come someone would mail her this? Was that a warning? Or a note informing her that she was going to inherit Kane's problems? With his counterattack outline finalized, Nick shut off his laptop. He had a strategy to face his opponent just before the board meeting, allies prepared, and information locked down. He had a surge of resolve, yet a glimmer of uncertainty also appeared.